Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football post-spring top 25 rankings heading into the 2024 season. And Dill, I spent so much time stacking these 25 teams. I probably spent 2 hours going back and forth with a lot of these different programs, left some teams out that I know I'm going to take some heat in the comment section for. Number one rule about this, let me hear it in the comments section. I don't even know if I agree fully with these top 25 rankings, so certainly let me hear it. We'll chop it up in the comments section. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate all the support you guys have been showing the boys lately. And Dill, let's get into this top 25. Now, you put yours out Saturday afternoon. We'll link that one in there. These are the accurate top 25 right here. I'll kind of let you tee off on me a little bit. The real difference that we have is I have 7 teams in my tier 1, and I think that's just because you look at all of these teams, that those top 7, and say, I mean, a lot of these teams can win against each other on all these given days. I think you have that clear top 4, Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, kind of however you want to kind of stack those 4 teams. But look at Michigan, Ole Miss, and Alabama and say, I mean, those are 3 teams that could beat those top 4 teams any given day. So I kind of threw them in that top tier, which is, kind of the primary difference that we kind of have in our top 25 here.
So I guess when I look at it, I agree with that top 4. Those top 4 teams I think are a little bit more complete than everyone else in the country, especially as it relates to Michigan and Alabama, because I think Ole Miss is right there. Like, you have the questions, just are they good enough yet? They just haven't quite done it, but that's not to say they can. It's like, are they deep enough? Are they talented enough on the line of scrimmage? But Michigan and Alabama, I look at them, both have like enormous questions. Michigan at the quarterback spot and the head coach spot, and same with Alabama, but just a little bit less experience and defense. Like, they have guys on offense for sure, but like those 2 teams got to answer massive questions. I just think to put them up in the same tier as like your Georgia, Oklahoma, or Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, like, I mean, like, wow.
So I'll tell you how. You look at Michigan, and we kind of talked about this on Saturday afternoon when you put out your rankings. I look at Michigan and say, yes, you have a massive question mark at quarterback, but we talked about that recipe, running the football, playing good defense. That's what made Michigan the last 3 years. I look at this team and how it's constructed and say, I don't think anything's changing about the recipe in which Michigan is going to be able to win these football games. And when you can run the football like Michigan's going to be able to, especially with potentially Alex Orji at the quarterback spot, and then you play dominant defense like Michigan is 100% going to play in 2024, they're going to be a hard team to beat every single Saturday. And then you look at Alabama, and I'm with you, right? You replace the best head coach of all time. You replace 2.
Head coach matters more in college football than any sport in the world, and I think it's by far.
100%. Now, where I would push back is you're bringing in a head coach that is one of the more impressive winning records that you've seen. You talk about pure football coaches. Kalen DeBoer has been one of the best at every single level he's been, and now he's just coming to one of the most talented teams in the country. I mean, he was able to win a lot of football games with Washington during the last 2 years. He inherits a program in Alabama that, like, yes, you lose 2 NFL cornerbacks, you lose 2 NFL edge rushers, 1 guy in Dallas Turner that was an absolute stud, but the more I look at this depth chart, this roster, I say, I mean, Jalen Milroe, one of the highest ceilings you have in the country heading into 2024. You're going to have an elite offensive line in my mind, especially on the inside. They're going to be able to run the football, play good defense, kind of similar to Michigan. Yes, you have some questions, but the recipe for them winning games is certainly still there. And that's kind of how I stack them up. And then I have Ole Miss sandwiched in between, kind of for your take, right? I am a massive believer in Ole Miss. The Ole Miss fans know that I am extremely high on this program heading into 2024. It's just you haven't necessarily seen them yet crack the top ceiling of the SEC. I kind of want to see it before I'm putting them in my top 4. Now, getting to the next tier, I'll kind of let you have at it again what teams you kind of want to dive into here.
No, I actually like this next tier you got. I think – again, you could quibble with the order of Tennessee and Missouri, and I think Tennessee fans aren't going to like it. Missouri fans are definitely going to appreciate you. I'm a little surprised, just given what I know about you. You have Miami kind of behind those 2 teams. I just wonder, like, how much it took you to put them there instead of putting them over.
Yeah, I'm extremely high on Miami. Most Miami Hurricane fans know that. I'll kind of break down to you one. Tennessee, I kind of have to give you the assist on that one. You had Tennessee awfully high. I kind of did some work on Tennessee this morning. I'm saying man, it doesn't get much worse than not worse than Joe Milton, but Joe Milton was not adding much to that Tennessee offense. Went back and watched the bowl game against Iowa. I'm a big Nico believer. And so I think you're just upgrading at quarterback. You have a very sneaky good offensive line with a lot of experience. And you look at that Tennessee defense, not something that people think about when they talk Josh Heupel, Tennessee. I look at that defense and you're kind of starting to see the fruits of their labor on the recruiting trail because they got a bunch of dogs on that defensive line, specifically in that front seven. So I'm a Tennessee believer. I go with Missouri over them because I think you have the experience with Brady Cook. Obviously, Luther Burden on the outside. You talk about winning big games in the SEC. I think Missouri returns a lot of production, specifically at that quarterback spot. Kind of gave me the edge. And then
how close do you have those two schools to that next tier? I was on
Tennessee and Missouri. I think that's probably where I want to cut it off because I still kind of trust the SEC programs like Alabama and Georgia along the line of scrimmage a little bit better than Missouri and Tennessee. But that's kind of how I stack my rankings in terms of this isn't like two teams are just far and away the best teams in the country. Like a lot of these teams 1 through 10, they can beat a lot of the top teams in the country any given week. We kind of saw that in 2023. I think you're going to see it again in 2024. Miami, Clemson, Florida State. You could wake me up each morning and just ask me how I want to stack those ACC teams. I'll probably give you a different order every single time I wake up. I was feeling like the Miami Hurricanes just because of what they've done in the transfer portal, how good that roster is. I go Clemson next. I just think that defense is going to be damn good. And then, Florida State, I kind of trust Mike Norvell. I trust him to win big football games. Question marks about the depth and just really the upper echelon talent level of that Florida State team. Still have them as a top 15 team in the country. Then Notre Dame, Penn State. Dill, I'll kind of let you critique me here with Penn State, who I know you're a little bit lower on heading into 2024.
Yeah, I'm not going to complain about Notre Dame. I agree with you. I think there are some questions for sure, which is why you leave them there. Can they play that dominant style on the ground that I think kind of fits what they want to do? But you do obviously have a really good quarterback coming in. I think a huge upgrade, frankly, from last year. So you like what Notre Dame has? Penn State, I just, at what point do you capitulate? At what point is it well, this offense just, something's got to change more than just Kotelnicki. You saw in the spring game, I was a little disappointed to see some of that. Again, a lack of production, a lack of creativity, a lack of something that just allowed you to play some sort of football that got you easy yards at any point in time. What about Penn State still got you intrigued? I know they can play good defense. No one's going to doubt that. What about this team? And frankly, Drew Lars.
I'll tell you what. So I look at Penn State and I kind of see him. And I think I'm low on Penn State. You're lower on Penn State, but I'm pretty damn low on Penn State. You see them routinely in the top 10 of these rankings for the same concerns you have. It's really hard to be a top 10 team in the country when you can't hit explosive plays. Now, you do bring in Coach Kotelnicki, who was one of the more explosive offensive coordinators during his time at Kansas. And I kind of thought back to myself and said, are you really going to read that much into a spring game just because they weren't that explosive during the spring? And I kind of said, no, they're going up and against an elite defense on the other side of the football. I think there's enough talent on Penn State. You got two very good running backs, still a 5-star quarterback. You're bringing Julian Fleming. There is enough talent for Coach Kotelnicki to get to work from. This Penn State team has probably the most potential in terms of having around 15 in the country. They could be a top 5 team in the country if this offense kind of comes together. But I'm kind of with you right now. After the last 2 seasons I've seen, especially in 2023, I'm just going to sit on my hands a little bit, and I'll be okay if Penn State proves me wrong getting that offense together. Now, I think you got that dark horse section. I look at Oklahoma and say Oklahoma and LSU, that is, and say maybe they belong kind of in the contenders category. I'll kind of let you get your first crack here.
Yeah, LSU, I agree with you. And you kind of came at me for saying I was a little too low on them, and you kind of put them in the same spot I put them in.
Yeah, I did.
And I kind of agree. At the end of the day, when you don't have enough confidence in what you're going to do defensively, and I get it, I still think they're going to move the ball. I don't think it's going to be the same as last year. You're just not going to repeat what Daniels did for that school in that program and those wide receivers they lost the first round. You're just losing too much talent. You're going to have a dominant offensive line for sure. You're going to have very good skill guys. I just don't see how you take that. I don't see how you don't take a step back on offense just because they were so good. And I love that they're bringing in a new defensive coordinator. I love it in the long run. I just still kind of look at, is the talent good enough in the short term, especially as it relates to that defensive line?
Yeah, that's so let's start on the offense first. And I think you're absolutely right. I kind of sold myself that this LSU offense is still going to be elite, which it still might be elite, but is it going to be a top 5, top 1 unit in the country?
There's like elite and then there's like historically good.
It's hard to see this LSU offense not taking somewhat of a step back, and especially when you think about the rushing attack and how much Jaden Daniels is involved in the rushing attack as well. You lose 2 first-round NFL wide receivers. I think this LSU offense is going to be damn good. They have an elite offensive line. It's just hard to see it being a top 5 unit in the country. And then you look on the defensive side of football, love the coaching staff change, love Blake Baker. I think defense is very correlated to personnel. Like, you need the dogs on defense to be good. And I just don't know if they have enough talent on defense. They didn't really address much in the transfer portal. They're kind of just running it back with what they had in 2023. I think just based on coaching, this defense takes a step in the right direction. Quite frankly, it's hard to replicate how bad it was last year, but it's hard for me to say it's going to be an above average defense immediately in 2024 because they didn't really do much in the transfer portal to add that immediate impact. You look at Oklahoma, I'm a believer in them. Just some question marks about how good that offensive line can be in the SEC. Texas A&M, dogs along the line of scrimmage in the front 7. If that offense can get going, Connor Wigman stays healthy, I think this Texas A&M team's kind of a dark horse to make the college football playoffs, and they'll kind of let you dig into me. USC, Utah, thoughts on having them in the dark horse category here?
Yeah, so I like Utah in there. If you look at my board, I have Utah in there too. I think, again, you do lose those 2 guys in the secondary with Bishop and Sione Vaki, and you kind of wish you kept them because, like, you keep those 2, you might put them in the contender spot because, again, they're going to be really good on defense, and Cam Rising back with legitimate weapons is interesting. So I like where you have Utah. USC, I don't know how you don't keep them in that like Cinderella tier.
Yeah.
If you were other team, you'd be really surprised if they made a run just because, I mean, I didn't do really much in the defensive line at this point, and still got a lot to come together on that defensive side of the ball, the line of scrimmage on the offensive side. There's just a lot of questions, I feel like, for USC to put them up.
USC is super hard to project in the Big Ten because I can see a reality where they really challenge Big Ten teams athletically in terms of just the pure speed that they have on the football field. And I'd say you look at this Iowa defense or a Michigan defense trying to defend USC and say, hey, USC is just way more athletic, kind of running circles around them. But you also get concerned, can they hold up in the trenches? I have massive question marks about the defensive line. I think they really did improve the secondary. I actually think that unit can be pretty damn good. Again, similar to LSU, this unit's going to improve under Dan Lynn. There's no doubt in my mind, but very similar to LSU, you have to replace a Heisman caliber quarterback. Question marks on how elite the offense is going to be. But at the end of the day, if Lincoln Riley's calling that offense, coaching the quarterbacks, I'm not going to bet against the USC offense. So I put him up in the dark horse category because when you can score points like Lincoln Riley has historically scored points, you're going to be able to win a lot of football games any given Saturday. Moving down to the top 25, and it's kind of dominated by Big 12 and ACC teams, right? You look at Kansas State, Arizona, and Kansas, kind of picking those 3 teams apart. Kansas State, I think, is a really complete team. I think Utah, Kansas State, probably my 2 favorites to win the Big 12. And then I look at Arizona and Kansas and say, I have massive question marks about both of their defenses. I don't think they have that elite talent on the defensive side of the football for either of them. And then I look at the offense and say, I am betting on those offenses scoring a lot of points. And again, when you can score the points that Arizona and Kansas can score, you can win a lot of football games, be extremely dangerous. That's why I kind of included Arizona and Kansas in my top 25.
And I totally agree with Kansas State, mainly because I think Kansas State, you've kind of seen, has built up a culture and a squad that, they don't recruit 5-star guys necessarily, but they're going to be physically ready to play. They can keep up with teams. They've always been really competitive. And you now have a much more explosive offense than you've probably seen in a long time, maybe going back to the Colin Klein days at Kansas State. So I think, again, you kind of look, they're going to score a lot of points this year. They always play sound defense. They're always really solid everywhere, line of scrimmage, all that. Arizona, to me, you do have the 2 horses. You have the quarterback, wide receiver battery for sure. But aside from that, I just wonder what else about that team is kind of screaming, top 25 or elite college football.
Yeah, Arizona and Kansas. I mean, I'm betting on. You got Noah Fafita and T-Mac. That might be the number one quarterback wide receiver duo you see in the country. I mean, outside of that, there are some question marks. Obviously, you're replacing Jedd Fisch. I look at Kansas and say, now that I'm kind of doing this again in my head, which is probably the 15th time I've done it today, I might put Kansas over Arizona and maybe slide Arizona back, because you look at Kansas, Jalen Daniels. I think also what you said about Kansas State might kind of be true for Kansas as well. I think Coach Leipold kind of has that culture cooking in Manhattan, Kansas, in Lawrence, Kansas. You got Jalen Daniels, Devin Neal, one of the best running backs in the country. You have 3 wide receivers returning for their 3rd year in this offense. They are going to put up so many points. Yes, you lose Coach Koldenicki, betting on the personnel for Kansas. And then you have NC State, Virginia Tech, and Nebraska. I'm a huge believer in Grayson McCall. I think he's a perfect fit. I think he's exactly what NC State needs. More importantly, a ton of weapons on the offensive side of the football. This is going to be a very good offense for NC State. If you watch the spring game, I think this offense is going to be really good. And then you just kind of trust Tony Gibson, Dave Doeren to have an elite defense. I'm a believer in NC State. You look at Virginia Tech and Nebraska, they were really solid teams in 2023, made some stupid mistakes to make them look a little bad. Now they return pretty much their whole rosters heading into 2024. I'm a believer in both of those programs from not only a continuity standpoint, but also from a culture standpoint. Brent Pry, Matt Rhule, huge believers in both.
The only thing I might quibble with, and I think I had it too, but I mean, as I look at this more and more, I think NC State probably deserves to be in that dark horse category. Yes. And I put them in that, like that 4th tier too as well. But the more I think about it, I go back, I watch returning 4 offensive linemen who played a lot of football last year, adding Grayson McCollum. They got horrible quarterback play. I know people like to talk about teams like Nebraska, some of these other teams that got bad quarterback play. Brennan Armstrong, that just did not work. I don't know what about that fit was so poor, but it were really bad on that front. I didn't think their offensive line was great, but again, you believe in what Dave Doeren's done in terms of building and developing. He's getting a lot of their guys back, a handful of guys on defense, and you add a lot of talent in that transfer portal. The more I think about it, the more I think NC State probably should be closer to Utah, USC, A&M than they are to maybe.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. If you're trusting NC State's defense to kind of hold serve, like, yeah, you lose a guy in Peyton Wilson. You also return a lot of really good football players for NC State on the defensive side of the football. And then you just kind of say this offense, but they go 8-4 last year. Like, that was a really good team last year that had really bad quarterback play. Grayson McCall, I think, is a massive step in the right direction. He looked apart during the spring game, but I think you made a good point. Outside of the quarterback play, I mean, they were relying on a true freshman to get it done as a wide receiver, kind of their do-it-all guy, because they didn't have another guy that could really be a difference maker. Now you add Noah Rogers to the portal. You had Jordan Waters in the running back room. I think you upgrade at quarterback. I think you upgrade with the playmakers around them. They'll very similar conversation in Nebraska. Like NC State, Nebraska, upgrading the quarterback spot, upgrading the offensive playmakers. Yeah, those are 2 teams that I think can be really dangerous in the 2024 season. We'll wrap it up on that. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. Let it fly. Let me have it. I left some teams out that I kind of went back and forth with, the Auburn Tigers being one of them, the Florida Gators being one of them, Louisville, another one. Let me have it in the comment section. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.